Thank you so much for joining our second episode of the Trans Chat. I'm Ryan, and joining me is our co founder, Jennifer Anderson. And today I am very excited to have another special guest with us, Riverboat Jack. Can you say hi to everyone, Riverboat?
Hello, everybody.
Yeah. Uh, what we do on this show is we interview people from the trans community to kind of get their backstories, their experiences to both grow our community and introduce new people to our community. And we also do talk a little bit about current events to keep people updated, but we always like to end things with a positive note. Now, with all that being said, thank you so much for taking the time and joining us here today. So, kind of just jumping right into it, one of the I feel more common questions that's going to get brought up and over again. Can you tell us your trans journey when you first felt something that maybe was an indication and how that kind of developed from there?
Yeah, so I remember maybe being like 5, and my memory is very spotty, which my therapist tells me is fairly common to people who've like repressed a lot. Trans people being particularly prone. So I have huge gaps in my memory from early childhood, but I distinctly remember being like 5 and walking around um on like my tiptoes, and like my parents were really concerned about this because that can be a sign of a lot of different like neurological problems. But I was just I was just pretending to be wearing high heels, like that's what I was doing and at 5 I knew that that wasn't like an okay thing for me to share with like my parents, because I already knew on to a certain extent like what would be acceptable and what would not. So I was just like, oh, haha, just being a goofy kid. And
Just a fun little thing.
yeah, and throughout my early years, I would like, I would keep coming back to that idea of being like a girl, and it kept like this hold on me. And growing up, I was in a very evangelical Christian home, and they they made sure that traditional gender roles were expected. Like, I don't think there was any like smoke filled rooms or anything. They weren't like conspiring to keep me like a man or anything, but there are a lot of expectations and like assumed heteronormativity on children, especially like back in the 90s and in the early aughts. And um so that wound up just kind of like, oh, I'm 12 and I got caught wearing a dress, or like just weirdly kept buying like high heels, and then I would um for a lot of people maybe are familiar with this of like binging and purging your closet. I think a lot of trans people in particular tend to go through that if they have to grow up closeted, where you just kind of amass like a closet full of your preferred gendered clothing, and then in a fit of despair or like sadness or whatever, you throw it all away in secret. And um so that kind of continued all the way up until I was in college, and at that point, I kind of had a bit of a break from like my evangelical roots, due to like some like interpersonal fallout. Well, where I was like volunteering at like Christian groups at on college campus, like, and then I realized, oh wait, this is a one-way street. You're not you guys aren't really giving anything back to me, and when I ask you about points of hypocrisy that I'm noticing in like scripture or in your organization, you're giving me extremely unsatisfactory answers. Like one point I asked about like, hey, like what's the deal with gay people? What's the deal with trans people? And I'm just like, genuine question. And the response I got was, well, some lesbians donate to our group. And I was just like, that's really unsatisfactory as a response. And that combined with just being kind of a bit ostracized and meeting other trans people who were living out really made me realize, hey, I might not be 100% cisgendered. And so it still took me years of struggling. For a while, I was like, well, okay, maybe I'm trans, but maybe it's something I can just hide until I die. Maybe I can be like a gender conforming non-binary person, in a way where like I'm basically passing as a binary gender while being non-binary. And I tried that and realized, nope, that just wasn't going to work. And then in 2015, I was like, okay, I have this closet full of stuff. I have like this entire set of unrealized and unexamined ideas and feelings. I need to figure that out. So I wound up starting to explore in 2015, and finally in like 2018, I went to therapy because I realized, I hit that point where I'm like, I'm trans, but if I come out and do anything about it, my life could be over. And I just hit the point where like, oh, literally over, as in like I might actually die. Like it might. I keep fantasizing about going out into the garage and like turning on my car and just drifting away, and like that's not normal, actually. That's not okay. And purely out of like self-defense, I need to do something about this. And around that same time, one of my close friends took his own life. And while he wasn't trans, I noticed a lot of parallels in our stories that kind of came out, and I learned afterwards, and it made it very real to me. Um, and um, sorry, yeah. So then I finally took the steps needed to like start HRT and come out publicly, and I didn't really finish with that process until about 2 years ago, actually. So I'm finally out to everybody. My entire family knows. Everybody knows, and it's a huge weight off my shoulders, but it certainly came at a cost.
Yeah. Well, first off, congratulations. I can only imagine that kind of internal struggle and the courage that it takes to come out knowing these repercussions or fantasizing about either the worst possible thing or having those things, of course, happen to you. You mentioned growing up in an evangelical household. I'm curious, how was your relationship to the church, and what is it like now?
So I grew up in a non-denominational evangelical, like kind of a mega church was kind of the go-to one. It like not one of like I don't think a very well-known one. Like it's in Minnesota, but like um I would go there, and I realized pretty early on that I just wasn't really super socially compatible with like a lot of the other kids in around my same age. So like my mom really made an effort to take us to church, like take me to church in particular. Every Sunday. And that we eventually gave that up. My dad went to seminary growing up and almost became preacher, but he dropped out, and he liked to say, he already knew everything he needed to know about the Bible. Like he did, he didn't need to go to church essentially. And so while I wasn't in church per se all the time, like my dad kind of carried himself as a preacher, and like I think like one of my great uncles or grandfathers was like came from a preaching family, and so like it was kind of something he viewed. My dad in particular viewed as like part of like our heritage, and it was important for me to be kind of instilled with those religious values. Sorry, I don't think I answered the other half of your question, but I totally forgot what it was.
No, it was just, first off, you're doing great, but secondly, the second part of that was, what is your relationship to the church now?
Yeah. Um, I mean, I would generally say that I've fallen pretty hard off of spirituality. I wouldn't say I'm like fully atheist per se, but maybe like a pretty firm agnostic. I don't pretend that there couldn't be like something supernatural out there that I'm just unaware of, you know? But yeah, I haven't been to church in a very long time. Like I know um one of the things I maybe should have mentioned earlier was growing up I would go to like an evangelical Bible camp. So like I would go there every summer, and I also worked there for 2 years, and so like it it was kind of all ingrained into me pretty hard, and I had a lot of really um strong feelings about religion that I just kind of came to realize like I think I feel like a lot of it is bullshit. I don't know if all of it is bullshit. I don't have the hubris to say all of it is, but like a lot of it is. And there's so much hypocrisy, and it just um to the extent that like I think I could say maybe I have like some kind of personal spirituality, but like I don't put much stock in it myself.
Yeah, fair enough, fair enough. Yeah. Um, so you mentioned that going and leaving the home and getting exposed to different people with different ideas, right? And also people with either different identities or different sexualities, etc. Coming into contact with those people made you have an introspection, essentially. So, my question is, did you meet people personally, or did you kind of just start to see people either in your periphery or people in the news or media? I guess what I'm asking is, how were you kind of exposed to the world of the queer community and the trans community?
Yeah, yeah, what transed me? Yeah,
Yeah, what trans you? Yeah, nothing hyperbolic there.
no, I kid, I kid. Growing up, my only exposure to trans people, and I believed at the time my only exposure to gay people was like on television. Um, for me, like Will and Grace was like, oh, that's the one gay person I know. They're on TV, and I wasn't allowed to watch that show. But
Dang.
um, I I primarily reference when I talk about that uh, Maori and Jerry Springer were like the big two for me. That's where I saw trans people. And for the longest time, I was like, well, I couldn't be a trans person because a trans person is someone who's on one of those shows. And, I'm just a normal person. I'm not going to be on TV in that way. And I don't want to be viewed that way. So I can't possibly be trans. And, it just, what ended up happening was in college, I had a friend group, and that friend group got bigger as people started dating, and you know, uh, a new person in the friend group like turned up at Halloween one year dressed as a lady, and I was like, "Is this like a costume, or is this like real?" And then like, they kept coming out dressed femme, and I was like, "Oh," and they're just like, "Wait, she's just normal." Oh,
Not on
wait,
Jerry
yeah,
Springer.
not on Jerry Springer, just out living her life. And then I started noticing like other trans people out on campus just kind of being themselves, and like th- nothing bad is happening to them. Like they're just out there living their lives, and I was like, "Oh, maybe that could be me." That's someone I could be, you know? Um, so that's kind of.
Okay.
I hope that answers the question.
No, 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 it definitely does, it
I tend
definitely
to
does.
ramble.
No, I'm comparing some of the things you're saying to our last interview. Our last interview was with, my fiancée, and one of the things that she described was kind of that young, like, absolute kind of knowing something was different. She used to wear towels, to, like, imitate long hair and stuff like that. Um, she also talked about meeting, trans people in the real world and realizing, "Oh, yeah, trans people are just people. They're not this, like, hyper depiction on media or anything like that, right? They're just people going around living their everyday lives." And so it seems to me that we're maybe starting to see a little bit of a good pattern of how people in the community can set either good examples by just existing and showing people that, hey, you too can also live a happy life and not hate yourself like every day. And you know, it's really heartwarming to see that. So moving on a little bit from the IRL stuff, let's not touch grass for a second. You have been on Twitch and streaming for how long now exactly?
So it's a bit nebulous because I really started doing what I do in around about 2020, but I've been following streaming and been making podcasts since like 2010, like since back when like Justin.tv was a thing instead of Twitch. Um, Dating myself a little bit there.
I
But
was there.
so I had like an account. I interviewed people because I was a game journalist for a long time, and then I started doing podcasts. Those kind of eventually evolved into doing live shows on streaming sites like Twitch, and then I went full time in 2020.
Okay, nice. And so branching off of that, this is a confession for our audience. I have been a long time Riverboat Jack fan, and I always loved your streams. And one of the cornerstones that kind of defines your media presence, in my opinion, is your trans identity and the relationships to other people in the trans community, in the queer community, streaming on Twitch, YouTube, etc., and kind of bringing people together in that online sphere. So, I guess a question that I do have is what has been one of the, I guess, proudest achievements of for creating such a positive and cool community that you really have?
Oh boy, it's a lot
I know,
because
broad question.
yeah, I a broad question, but also I tend to downplay the kinds of things I do in my life. So picking one thing is difficult. Like uh, last weekend, I was able to use my position in kind of the broader online space, and people told me in confidence that my involvement helped them decide to get involved. But to canvass for progressive candidate for Congress, Jamal Bowman, it turned out a whole bunch of people, and that event, we knocked over 7,000 doors. Ultimately, he didn't win, but like I'm really proud of being able to turn, our online audience into like a progressive powerhouse that's going to go out and fight not just for, general progressive values, but also I hope for trans people. I want to build a community that is willing to go to bat for marginalized folks, and um that's kind of, I think, been my goal this entire time. Like I want to make a difference. I want to build up, a community of people who can kind of be there for each other, and that community in the sense of yes, my viewership, but also like other creators, their communities, like build a space where we can all kind of help each other out when things get tough. Because I think, frankly, a lot of us, trans people in particular, we tend to be isolated. And I my goal, and to whatever extent I've succeeded in that, is to try and overcome that isolation a bit. Um, and I've done that. I've raised money for different trans charities, Rainbow Bridge. No, not Rainbow Bridge. Rainbow Passage. I just fundraised for and organized for. I'm going to be doing another fundraising effort in about a week or so that I was supposed to do during Pride Month, but I just got way too busy. Um, but like the small, I'm not a big creator really in the scheme of things, but like to whatever extent I can do what I can do, if it's a few $1,000s in a fundraiser here or there, I want to make the space better for everybody.
Yeah. I think one of the themes that we've talked about, Jennifer and I, is the difference between an online community and an IRL community. And you're absolutely right. It seems to me that trans people, whether it is by just familial circumstance, or they happen to live in maybe like a very red district or something like that, or they just live in the United States in general or anywhere, uh, coming out is terrifying and scary, and not having someone, you know, in your corner, someone in your community for that emotional support is pivotal. So one of the things that I really want to stress here is I don't think you should downplay your effectiveness, because your ability to combine that online community, which is absolutely pivotal. And in some cases, in many cases, it's the only community that trans people get to experience, to leverage that into an a real world kind of community and political action. That's really big. So by all means,
Thank
take
you.
that, that's really fantastic. Uh, that's a big theme that we talk about a lot, is the sense of community. That's kind of what this whole project is about, is building a community, both for online presence and also for real world change and real world community. So,
And
thank you so much
and
for that.
real
Um,
yeah, no, thank you.
go
I
ahead.
just want to say, and that is GFS's mission, like um, is just normalizing our existence. And I think your mission has absolutely done that, and I appreciate it for one as a trans person. I do. So I've actually never seen you or anything, but I'm definitely going to be following you now. So,
Appreciate that. Thank
but
you.
yeah, sure.
Mhm.
I just wanted to say I agree. So,
Mhm. So, now dipping a little bit into probably a big point of tension. If you, either in the audience or sitting here right now, keep up with politics at all, we just saw a very disastrous debate just a couple days ago between President Biden and former President Donald Trump. And I think I'm kinda just gonna lay out a very soft opinion, and I'd love to kind of open it up to you, Riverboat, just because you're oh, excuse me, you're really into politics. That's part of your streaming content, but also you just talked about a real world effort that you made. So, uh, in my opinion, I'm not the biggest fan of Joe Biden. I think he's not I wish everything the right wing claimed that Joe Biden was doing or is, I really wish that he did those things. That would be what an amazing president. Be the president that the right wing fears that you are. But unfortunately, he's an old sundowning man who is trying to stick out this presidential race at possibly the detriment of millions of Americans. And most poignantly for this podcast, the trans community I'm very scared for the queer community, for the trans community, for a Donald Trump president. It's not exactly that it's all sunshine and rainbows under the current president by any means, but So I kind of want to talk to you a little bit about that. Um, you just uh, campaigned for Jamal Bowman. To remind everybody, yes, unfortunately, he did not win that election, but you've kind of got your finger on the pulse here. What, in your opinion, or what are some major concerns you have about a potential Donald Trump presidency? And I know that's another big, vague question. So by all means, like you can pick a couple, but I know it's kind of it's a lot.
Yeah, concerns I have about a Donald Trump presidency. I mean, off the top of my head, the biggest is Project 2025. And if you guys haven't heard about it, it is essentially a project of many different conservative think tanks coming together, the biggest and most influential ones, coming together and basically creating a roadmap of how to gut the bureaucratic state in order for Donald Trump to essentially become a dictator. It is. I don't think that that is hyperbolic to say. Combined with the recent Supreme Court rulings, like it is. Um, I I mean, they ruled that any official acts the president takes are immune from prosecution. Like that combined with Project 2025, the danger that Donald Trump poses to America, I would describe as existential. And therefore the danger, like, and that's just to democracy in America as a concept. For trans people in particular, I have to say, like, not to be doom and gloom, because right now it's the time to roll our sleeves up, get to work, and fight. But make sure while you're rolling up those sleeves to get your passport, your paperwork all in order, just in case. Okay, it's better to have it than to not. Worst case scenario, you can take a vacation in Canada or Mexico. Okay, like just get your paperwork and do your hardest, fight like hell, because Donald Trump is extraordinarily dangerous. His first term in office was basically him assuming he already had all of the power that these plans like Project 2025 will give him, and the Supreme Court has now retroactively given him. And I fear that him now kind of knowing how the levers of power work, it's going to be a much faster decline and destruction of our institutions that currently prevent someone from literally rounding up people into camps, trans citizens into camps. Like, it's it's not good, very bad. That's my short analysis.
Yeah, no, I completely I completely agree with you. In I think a slight portion of frustration for me is I mean, unfortunately, I'm brain dead. I'm on Twitter still, so I see all of the absolute worst opinions every single day. Uh, that being said, one of the more prevalent ones I constantly see from people on the left as well is this kind of fatalistic view on the difference between another Biden presidency or another Democratic presidency and a Donald Trump presidency. And I understand the frustration, the lack of progress, are we trying to improve people's lives or are we just trying to postpone fascism for another 4 years? That being said, I think it does come from a point of privilege to some extent, overlooking people whose lives will be absolutely destroyed, the queer community, the trans community, immigrants, etc. People who are the most vulnerable in our society stand to lose the worst. And so I I really don't want to. I hate it. But I will vote for uh a senile old man over someone that's going to make the lives worse, arguably worse for literally everyone in the country, and especially for the trans community and the queer community. So, that all being said, I don't want to end on a sad, doomer pilled note. So, I've heard you speak about this a little bit before. You talked about how when you left the home and you started to get exposed to trans people in the real world, especially people not in media, right? Not the hyperbolic portrayals of trans people, but actual trans people on the ground, right? Not putting on a performance, let's say. For your online community, have you received any messages from people essentially telling you or exclaiming that, hey, it's because of this online community, it's because of this exposure that I have either realized who I am or I feel safe to talk about this with you? People that might even not be trans either, people who are just questioning anything, gender norms, their own sexuality, the whole spectrum. But I'm curious, have you received or seen any of that kind of come out of your community?
So, just real quick, I wanted to build off of something you said before that question, and then I'll get
Oh,
back to
yeah.
it.
So sorry.
No, no, it's okay. You just brought up a lot of the people on like Twitter and stuff, and I would encourage anyone who's getting like their news off of online sources to remember to ground yourself, because the people on Twitter are not the majority of people in America. They're not a good like test for where people are. And a lot of those people, you know, I think are going to have a lot of thoughts and feelings before they get to the voting booth. And I think that really what we need to concern ourselves with are people who generally don't vote, who aren't mobilized, who aren't that interested, because those are really the people who are most likely to get out there and go to the polls in the first place. And like I'm not I'm there are certain people I'm not gonna just look in the face and tell them you got to vote for Biden. It's just not my place. But
Yeah.
I think people should. I think he's the lesser of two evils. But there are limits to that. Now, to
Yeah.
your point, and your question, yeah, I get a lot of messages from folks. Not like every day or anything like that, but like maybe like once every month or 2 months, I'll get a message from someone who says, I felt safe enough to come out in your community, or like you had a really big effect on me, and like, hey, remember me? I was in your chat for like a year, and then I disappeared, and now I'm trans, and hi, and it's like, oh, welcome back, hello.
Just a little
It's
caterpillar.
Yeah, there are a lot of people who are just looking for a safe place to figure themselves out and become themselves. And I am extraordinarily privileged in that I get to kind of manage and see people come into their own in this community. It's really beautiful, just seeing the difference. And I can't see most of their faces when they're chatting to me on their keyboards or anything, but like it it makes it makes me feel really good to know that, like, though the world may have denied them a safe spot to like figure themselves out and experiment with who they are and figure out who they are, like they can come here and do it. People, unfortunately, like I've been around the trans community for a long time, and unfortunately there are some not so safe places to kind of come into identity and find yourself, and i I'm glad that I can provide a safe spot to do that.
Yeah. Well, that makes two of us. And to kind of just harp back for just a second, I absolutely agree with your earlier point. There are absolutely people. I'm not sitting here trying to bash people to tell them
Yeah.
you have to vote for a genocide in supporting president. Obviously, I completely understand people's reservations, but don't overlook, I guess, is what my 2 cents is. Don't overlook the most vulnerable in this country because they stand to learn. They stand to lose the most. Uh, that being said, Riverboat, thank you so much for joining us. Please tell us where we can all find you.
You can all find me over on Twitch and YouTube under the name Riverboat Jack, twitch.tv/Riverboat Jack. I'm one of the featured Pride partners for the entire year. And I'm also on YouTube, youtube.com/riverboatjack. And if you want to come over to my super special chatting site, it's riverboat.gg.
Well, thank you so much for joining us. I can't tell you enough how grateful I am that you took the time. Uh, we will we will definitely try to get you on again in the future because that was a fantastic statement. So thank you so much.
Well, I'd be delighted at any time. And of course, both of you are invited to come on my show formally anytime.
All right.
Thank you.
Well, thank you, Riverboat. Anyway, you have a great one. Enjoy the rest of your stream. And to your chat, thank you so much for bearing with us getting through our technical difficulties.
Oh, they don't mind. They're used to that. All
All
right.
right.
You two have a wonderful day.
We
You too.
will. Thank you so much.
Bye.